You know what's terrifying? It's not that you might not be smart enough. It's that you might be getting dumber. Right now, today, without even realizing it. We think intelligence is fixed, something you're born with, something that stays constant throughout your life. But that's not true. Your intelligence is more like a muscle. It can grow stronger, or it can atrophy. And most people, without knowing it, are choosing atrophy every single day. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you had a genuinely original thought? Not something you read on social media, not something you heard in a podcast, but a thought that came from deep contemplation, from wrestling with a complex idea, from sitting with uncertainty until clarity emerged. Can't remember? That's the problem. Because while you've been busy consuming, busy scrolling, busy filling every quiet moment with noise, something inside you has been dying. Your capacity for deep thought, for original insight, for true intelligence. And the worst part? The things that are killing your intelligence are so subtle, so normalized, so woven into daily life that you don't even see them. You think you're just living, just getting by, just doing what everyone else does. But you're not. You're slowly lobotomizing yourself. And by the time you realize it, you might not have enough intelligence left to care. I'm going to tell you something I've never admitted out loud, something that makes me deeply uncomfortable. There was a period in my life, maybe 2 years long, where I could feel myself getting stupider. Not in an obvious way, not in a way I could point to, but I knew, I could feel it, like something inside my mind was dimming. I'd sit down to read a book, something I used to do effortlessly, and after 10 minutes my mind would wander. I'd try to think through a complex problem, something I used to enjoy, and I'd get frustrated and give up. I'd be in conversations where I used to have insights, and I'd find myself just repeating things I'd heard somewhere else. And the scariest part? I was okay with it. I'd tell myself I was just tired, just busy, just getting older. But deep down, I knew what was really happening. I was trading my intelligence for comfort, for ease, for the path of least resistance. And it started with something so simple, so innocent, that I didn't even recognize it as dangerous. I'd started filling every empty moment with my phone. Waiting in line? Phone. Sitting on the toilet? Phone. Waking up in the morning? Phone. Going to bed at night? Phone. Every moment of potential boredom, every gap of silence, every second of stillness, I filled it with content, with stimulation, with other people's thoughts. And you see, boredom isn't just uncomfortable. Boredom is essential. It's in those empty moments, those boring moments, those unstimulated moments, that your brain does something crucial. It processes, it integrates, it makes connections, it generates original thoughts. But I wasn't giving my brain those moments anymore. I was feeding it constantly, endlessly. And just like a body that never stops eating eventually stops being able to digest properly, my mind was losing its ability to think properly. Can I be honest with you about something? Most people's intelligence isn't declining because of age. It's declining because they've trained their brain to be passive, to consume rather than create, to absorb rather than analyze, to react rather than reflect. And it starts with this, with the phone, with the constant stimulation, with the addiction to distraction. But it doesn't end there. Because once you've trained your brain to expect constant input, once you've conditioned yourself to never be bored, other things start to change too. You stop reading deeply. You skim. You scan. You look for bullet points and summaries. You want information fed to you in bite-sized pieces. The idea of sitting with a complex book for hours becomes unbearable. Your attention span, that crucial muscle of intelligence, begins to atrophy. I watched this happen to someone I knew. A man named David, brilliant guy, used to read voraciously, philosophy, history, science. He could hold these long, nuanced conversations about complex topics. And then he got a smartphone. And over the course of maybe 3 years, I watched him change. He stopped reading books, started reading articles, then stopped reading articles, started reading headlines, then stopped reading headlines, started just scrolling through images and videos, And his conversation changed. It became shallower, more reactive, more based on whatever he'd seen that day online. He'd lost something, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. This depth of thought that used to characterize him just disappeared. This is what constant distraction does. It doesn't just waste your time. It restructures your brain. It trains your neural pathways to expect rapid-fire stimulation. And when you try to do something that requires sustained attention, sustained thought, your brain rebels. It's been conditioned to switch, to move, to jump from thing to thing, and you feel it. As mental exhaustion, as inability to focus, as this constant restlessness. Even when you're trying to concentrate, your intelligence hasn't disappeared, but your ability to access it has been compromised. But here's the thing. It's not just the phone. There's something else you're doing, something even more insidious. You're outsourcing your thinking. Every time you have a question, what do? You Google it immediately, without even trying to figure it out yourself, without wrestling with uncertainty, without allowing your brain to work through the problem. Someone mentions a fact you don't know, phone out, looking it up. Someone asks a question, you're searching for the answer before you even attempt to think about it. You need directions? GPS. You need to remember something? You set a reminder. You need to calculate something? Calculator. And each time you do this, each time you outsource a cognitive task to technology, you're telling your brain, you don't need to do this anymore. Something else will handle it. And your brain, efficient organ that it is, obliges. It stops developing those capacities. It lets them weaken. It reallocates resources elsewhere. I remember when I realized I'd lost something crucial. I was trying to navigate to a place I'd been dozens of times, and I couldn't remember how to get there. Not because it was complicated, but because I'd always used GPS. I'd never actually learned the route. I'd just followed instructions. And that's when it hit me. I'd stopped learning geography, stopped building spatial awareness, stopped developing my sense of direction. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't have to. And my brain, sensing this, had simply let that capacity fade. This is happening in countless ways. You're not remembering phone numbers anymore, not remembering birthdays, not remembering facts, not working through problems, not calculating in your head, not navigating on your own, not figuring things out. You're just asking your phone. And every time you do, you get a little bit dumber. Then there's something else, something you might not even recognize as a problem. You've stopped having conversations that challenge you. You've surrounded yourself with people who think like you do, who agree with you, who validate your existing beliefs. And this feels good, doesn't it? It's comfortable. It's easy. There's no conflict, no tension, no uncomfortable moments where you have to defend your ideas or question your assumptions. But intelligence doesn't grow in comfort. Intelligence grows in friction, in disagreement, in being forced to articulate your thoughts clearly, in encountering perspectives that challenge yours, in having to think harder, deeper, more carefully because someone is pushing back. When you only talk to people who agree with you, when you only consume content that reinforces what you already believe, when you automatically dismiss or avoid anything that makes you uncomfortable, you're creating an echo chamber. And in that echo chamber, your intelligence stagnates. Because you're not thinking anymore. You're just confirming. You're not analyzing. You're just agreeing. You're not growing. You're just hardening into your existing patterns. I knew a woman once, Sarah, sharp mind, quick wit, used to love debate, love intellectual challenge. And then something changed. She started curating her environment, unfollowing people who disagreed with her, avoiding conversations that might lead to conflict, surrounding herself only with people who saw the world exactly as she did. And over time, her thinking became rigid, black and white. She lost the ability to see nuance, to hold complexity, to understand perspectives different from her own. She'd become less intelligent, not because she couldn't think, but because she'd stopped exercising that muscle. She'd made her mental environment so comfortable that there was no reason to grow. This is spiritual death disguised as peace. This is intellectual atrophy disguised as knowing yourself. And it's happening to millions of people who think they're just being smart about managing their mental health, their boundaries, their energy. But you're not managing anything. You're hiding. And your intelligence is paying the price. Here's another thing you're doing. And this one's going to sting. You've stopped finishing things. You start books and don't finish them. Start projects and abandon them. Start learning something and quit when it gets difficult. You're a perpetual beginner at everything and a master of nothing. And you tell yourself it's because you're exploring. You're keeping your options open. You're a Renaissance person with diverse interests. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is you've lost the ability to push through difficulty, to persist when things get hard, to develop true competence in anything. Intelligence isn't just about being clever. It's about depth, about mastery, about the insights that only come from going deep into something, from wrestling with complexity until you break through to understanding, from staying with difficulty long enough that easy becomes possible. But you're not doing that anymore. You're skimming the surface of everything, and surface-level engagement produces surface-level thinking. You're accumulating information but not developing wisdom. You're busy but not progressing. You're learning a little about everything but understanding nothing deeply. Can I be honest with you? I fell into this trap. I had dozens of books half read, courses half finished, skills half learned, and I convinced myself this was intellectual curiosity, that I was just exploring. But the truth was simpler and more painful. I was avoiding the discomfort of going deep. I was choosing the easy dopamine hit of starting something new over the hard work of mastering something difficult. And my intelligence suffered. Because real intelligence, the kind that produces original insight, comes from depth, from seeing connections others miss because you've gone further than others go, from understanding nuance that only reveals itself to those who persist. You can't get that from dabbling. You can't get that from sampling. You can only get that from commitment, from finishing, from going all the way through. And then there's this. You've stopped sitting with uncertainty. You've stopped tolerating not knowing. The moment confusion arises, the moment you don't understand something, you either give up or immediately seek an answer from someone else. But intelligence lives in the space of not knowing, in the discomfort of confusion, in the tension between question and answer. That's where your brain does its most important work. That's where insight emerges. That's where understanding deepens. When you immediately resolve every moment of confusion, when you can't tolerate not knowing even for a few minutes, you're preventing your brain from doing the work that makes it stronger. You're looking up the answer before you've even tried to figure it out. You're asking someone to explain it before you've sat with it. You're seeking clarity before you've wrestled with complexity. And each time you do this, you're training your brain to be dependent, to be passive, to wait for someone else to do the thinking. And slowly, quietly, your capacity for original thought diminishes. I remember reading about how Einstein would sit with problems for hours, days, months, just sitting, thinking, turning the problem over in his mind, exploring different angles, not rushing to a solution, not seeking immediate clarity, just thinking. And we've lost that. We've lost the ability to sit with a question, to live in uncertainty, to think slowly and deeply about difficult things. We want answers immediately. We want clarity now. We want to move on. But intelligence doesn't work on our schedule. Insight doesn't arrive on demand. Understanding takes time. And if you're not willing to give it that time, if you're not willing to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, you'll never develop the depth of thought that separates shallow cleverness from true intelligence. Here's something else, and you probably won't like hearing this. You've stopped challenging your body. You've become sedentary. And you think this only affects your physical health, but it's affecting your brain too. Your brain and body aren't separate. They're one system. And when your body is stagnant, when you're sitting all day, when you're not moving, not exercising, not challenging your physical self, your brain suffers too. Blood flow decreases. Neuroplasticity declines. Your ability to learn, to remember, to think clearly. All of it diminishes. There's mounting evidence that physical exercise doesn't just keep your body healthy, it keeps your brain healthy. It promotes neurogenesis. It improves memory. It enhances cognitive function. It literally makes you smarter, but you're not exercising. Or if you are, it's half-hearted, minimal, just enough to say you did something. You're not pushing yourself, not challenging your body, not creating the conditions that force adaptation and growth. And your intelligence is suffering for it. You're more foggy, more forgetful, more mentally sluggish, and you think it's just stress or age or life. But it's simpler than that. Your body is stagnant, and so is your mind. I watched this happen to myself. During a period where I stopped exercising, where I was just sitting at a desk all day, my thinking became muddy, unclear. I'd struggle to articulate ideas that used to come easily. I'd forget things constantly. I'd feel this mental fog that wouldn't lift. And when I finally started exercising again, consistently, intensely, something shifted. My thinking cleared. My memory improved. Ideas started flowing again. It wasn't magic. It was biology. My brain needed my body to move. And finally, this last one is perhaps the most insidious of all. You've stopped creating. You only consume. You watch, you read, you listen, you scroll, but you don't make anything. You don't write. You don't build. You don't produce. And consumption without creation is intellectual death. Because when you only consume, you're only using half your brain. You're taking in information, but never processing it deeply enough to produce something original from it. You're a spectator of intelligence rather than a participant. Creation forces clarity. When you try to write something, you discover what you actually think. When you try to build something, you discover what you actually understand. When you try to teach something, you discover what you actually know. Creation is the crucible where shallow understanding is either refined into deep knowledge or revealed as the illusion it was. But you're not creating, you're just consuming. And consuming is easy. It's passive. It requires nothing from you. And so your brain, efficient as always, gives you nothing. It doesn't develop new connections, doesn't generate original insights, doesn't grow. Can I tell you something that changed everything for me? I started writing. Not for anyone else, not to publish, just writing. Working through ideas, trying to articulate thoughts clearly. And I was shocked by how difficult it was. How often I realized I didn't actually understand things I thought I understood. How many of my opinions were just borrowed from someone else. How shallow my thinking actually was. But the process of writing, of creating, of trying to produce something original, it forced me to think harder, deeper, more carefully. It developed my intelligence in ways that reading never could. Because creation requires something consumption doesn't. It requires you to actually use your brain at full capacity. So here's what all of this adds up to. You're constantly distracted. You've outsourced your thinking. You avoid intellectual challenge. You never finish anything. You can't tolerate uncertainty. You've let your body stagnate. And you only consume, never create. Each of these things, individually, might seem harmless, might seem like just the way modern life works. But together they're systematically dismantling your intelligence, making you less capable of deep thought, less able to generate original insights, less intelligent than you could be, than you should be. And the scariest part? You probably didn't even realize it was happening, because it's so subtle, so gradual, so normalized. You just thought you were getting older, busier, more tired. You didn't realize you were actively participating in your own intellectual decline. But now you know, and now you have a choice. You can keep doing these things, keep trading your intelligence for comfort, for ease, for the path of least resistance, or you can stop. You can put the phone down and sit with boredom. You can think before you Google. You can seek out people who disagree with you. You can finish what you start. You can sit with uncertainty. You can move your body. You can create something. Not tomorrow, not when you have more time, not when it's convenient. Now, right now, today, because your intelligence isn't fixed. It's not something you have or don't have. It's something you're either growing or killing. And every choice you make is a vote for one or the other. So what are you choosing? What are you doing right now, today, that's quietly making you dumber? And more importantly, are you willing to stop? The mind you save might be your own.